So you're managing a brand. Could we answer this question for people at home? Like, what does a brand mean when it comes to a game?
Brand isn't what you say it is. Your brand is a reflection of what your players tell you it is. It's a reason why you buy Adidas over Nike or the other way around. They're both sneakers, they're both great. Which one do you choose?
Today I'm joined by a strategic brand and marketing leader with over 20 years in the games industry. He's helped shape global franchises like Need for Speed, Unravel 2, and The Hunter Call of the Wild, working with studios including EA, Codemasters, and most recently, Avalanche Studios.
We didn't have the roaming police in the open world, which we now know was a key motivation for playing Need for Speed, which is you want to be a badass. How do you be a badass? By outwitting the cops. If there are no free roaming cops, you can't outwit the cops to be a badass. And therefore, it didn't deliver on a motivation.
We talk about how to build brand into your game from day one, engaging your players earlier than you'd think, and what it means to be in brand marketing at different studios.
Your product needs to mean something. It needs to stand out. It needs to be remarkable. It's not about being the best. It's not about being the cheapest. It's not about being the shoutiest or the most expensive. It's just about standing out for something or some collection of things that make you remarkable.
From someone who's helped create global brands, this episode's guest, Edd Newby-Robson. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Harry. Lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you. And yeah, very excited for this conversation. So I'll quickly catch people up and I want to get straight into it. So we met at Nordic Game at the Avalanche Open House. And
yes.
For people at home, 20 plus years in the games industry, brand and marketing at pretty much the highest level. So we're talking for franchises like Need for Speed, Unravel 2, Hunter Call of the Wild, working at studios like EA, Codemasters, and most recently Avalanche. So what we wanted to get into today is kind of why some studios still treat marketing a bit like an afterthought and kind of talking about what is an actual brand when it comes to marketing and then all the things that follow from that. So I want to get straight into it and ask kind of how has a marketing brand kind of evolved over when you first started in games, when you've started now? Because I've noticed on your LinkedIn, like the job titles you've had aren't that dissimilar. For example, like senior brand marketing director, and then group head of marketing, and then at the Codemasters was a senior global brand manager. So you're managing a brand, but that's over like 15 years. So I'm guessing the definition of what a brand means probably has changed. So like, could we answer this question for people at home? Like, what does a brand mean when it comes to a game?
Awesome question. And it definitely has changed over the years. I think in very simple language, a brand is a way to choose. It's a reason why you buy Adidas over Nike or the other way around, right? They're both sneakers. They're both great. Which one do you choose? And a great example of that is if you walked into a hotel that was Nike branded, you'd be able to tell that was a Nike hotel. But if you perhaps as an opposite, and that's because Nike are bloody brilliant with brands. But if you walked into if you bought a sneaker that was built by Hilton, probably less able to tell, right? In games, I've been doing brand for a long time, and I think it's definitely evolved to be more sophisticated. Okay. At Codemasters, we had great brands. We had Colin McRae Rally, which turned into Dirt, and we had to have a real big think about that point where we dropped the Colin McRae from it, because sadly Colin died in 2007, and that was a really interesting challenge for the company, is like respecting his lineage, respecting his life, because we were great partners and we got on very well with his family as well. But also being able to move on from that, because I think you just have to. So it was a really big challenge in kind of figuring out how we did that. And we did it basically by going from Colin McRae Rally, Colin McRae Dirt, and then I think it was still Colin McRae's Dirt 2. And then on Dirt 3, which was the game that I personally kind of drove from the beginning, we decided that's it, it's done. And we checked with the family that they were okay with it. We did some great DLC that was a kind of charitable donation to his charity. But yeah, it was definitely something that was a big challenge for us.
You're thinking of the word transition there, because like you kind of did it very gracefully, especially with the little cherry on top of the DLC.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to do it. We wanted to respect it. But I think brand has become so much more important, because there are what is it, 18,000 games launched on Steam last year or something crazy.
Kind of become a joke on the podcast that I think it comes up
right
every podcast.
I didn't even want to say it, but you have to. And according to Newzoo, it's like 8% of game time isn't games that are more than 6 years old or something like
Yeah,
that. So
it's
every
the old
every
game
year.
problem. So when we hit the gaming playbook bingo card, we talked about the old game problem and the Steam amount of games. So
So
yeah, it's a real problem. It's a real challenge, I would say.
exactly. So game quality is super important. Always, like, if you don't have a great game or a good game, a solid game, that's the foundational piece. But then being able to differentiate yourself from a brand perspective as to giving people a reason to choose A platformer over B platformer or A racing game over B racing game, that's where brand really has value, because people go in the old days to go into a store. That's one thing. That's one massive thing that's changed, right? Is you used to have people browsing in physical stores,
Yeah,
and
I remember
nowadays
I used to go into game in the mall, and I always thought I wish I could play Sims because the cover art looked really cool. But then I never did because my dad was like, "Games are free, just use the internet." I was like, "Okay," but like that was my experience. But I used to be like pretty much making decisions based on cover art.
Yeah, and you'd browse, and now it's similar, but ultimately, so much more game discovery is friend recommendations, and your discovery queue on Steam, and just frankly spending money on advertising. But yeah, brand's still super important, and is more so because you need other ways to stand out. And I think we were probably just less aware of what brand is. And I think another thing I learned at EA actually was that brand isn't what you say it is. Your brand is a reflection of what your customers, players tell you it is. And that was really that came about very strongly because on Need for Speed Payback, for example, we built what we thought was a good game. We were like, we're going after Fast and the Furious. We're going to be a massive, explosive entertainment spectacle, and that was great. Like, awesome, love that. But in building that game and making the decisions when you come to scope cutting, we cut free roaming police, thinking, well, we've got this big explosive game, great story. We've got the things that make Need for Speed important. We had our brand tenets, which are the things we made up. And then we did, then Payback wasn't the best Need for Speed game ever launched. There were lots of reasons for that, but we did a bunch of research afterwards and asked players, and basically you can track it from. We didn't have the roaming police in the open world, which meant that when you weren't in the story, you didn't encounter the police. You couldn't get into police chases, which we now know, or we then knew, was a key motivation for playing Need for Speed, which is you want to be a badass. How do you be a badass? By outwitting the cops. If there are no free roaming cops, you can't outwit the cops to be a badass. And therefore, it didn't deliver on motivation. And I think that's where you start to get.
That's interesting because that's actually. I want to touch on that before we go back onto brand, because like that's almost like the role player in the player, I guess, but also like the expectation when they play the game. Like when I play Grand Theft Auto, if there was no police, what's the game? There's no game. There's no consequences. And I bet like the core gameplay loop in the race will probably check in all the boxes, but then the person didn't feel like they got what they expected, even though the core gameplay loop might have been there, which is interesting because it was like, we're not measuring based on if that game was quote unquote enjoyable. It's like, okay, but outside of this experience, I don't feel what I wanted to feel. And now it feels frustrating or, lackluster, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the way we think about brands is a game has a certain amount of features, or a brand has a certain amount of things that have to be in it to make it that. A Nike has to have the swoosh on it, for example. That's a visual indication, but it probably has a bunch of other things that I don't know because I'm not a Nike expert. But in Need for Speed, it had to have cops, it had to have a narrative, but not a story. It had to have customization, all those kind of things. They then give you the benefit of that is your functional benefits in a game. So what does it allow you to do? It allows you to have cop chases. Cops allow you to have cop chases. And then what emotions do they trigger? What emotional benefits? Well, cop chases are like nerve-wracking, they're exciting, and they allow you to ultimately escape the cops, which then give you that payoff. And the payoff is
but
feeling like a badass.
That's interesting. But you had all of that, I'm guessing, in missions, but you don't have the same stakes, I guess, because it's a mission.
And once the career was done, which is what I don't remember what it was, 8 hours or something, and the meat and bones of those big racing games is not just the career, it's the rest of it, right? And people just weren't getting out of it what they expected, and they told us, and they said this is not the Need for Speed game I expected it to be, and so and this is it's difficult for smaller brands to do this, but there are some ways. But really, truly understanding what your players tell you your brand is critical, especially if it's a long-running brand like The Hunter Call of the Wild or Need for Speed or The Sims or any of those games.
Sweet. What I'd love to do maybe is I did this once on a podcast with Bobby. We talked about game scouting, and we just covered like the three, I guess, stages. So you mentioned small brands, so I want to single them out here. So the people listening who are maybe they've made one or two games, or they're doing their first game, and they've started to think, okay, how do I approach brand? I don't know if you've ever spoken to any indie developers before where they've made some common mistakes, or they might have misunderstood certain things. Like, what should a new developer look for when it comes to developing their brand for their games? What should they be looking out for?
Really great question, and I was on a call with an indie developer this morning, actually, and I won't name any names, but the developer in question has chosen to use some of their company brand in the name of the game, which I think is a really interesting choice. It kind of really reflected on that, because I thought, is that just making it a bit complicated? But then what I liked about that is they're trying to build a brand for their company as much as the game, because whilst it's complicated, and I don't think there's necessarily a certain answer to it, but brand is important if you intend to exist more than one game. Like, if it's only a single game, right?
Because if you're not, then you're pretty much promising you either fail, or you're building one title and that's pretty much everything the company will ever do. But that sounds risky.
Yeah, and I think an example of that, and I work closely with Hazelight, who are now very famous because with Split Fiction being their latest release, and their brand is basically Joseph Fares, because he is absolutely incredible at building, not only building great games and get great games that stand out, but also he has a vision and he has what he wants to do. And I think a lot of people just know Joseph Fares makes a game, I'm going to go buy that because it's going to be amazing.
In the movies, for example, like a movie director.
Absolutely the same. Yeah, if it's if it's Steven Spielberg, God, it shows my age, doesn't it? Any other movie director, Bruckheimer, that's probably still not helping. Any movie director has a style and has a reason. You will go to see a movie if for James Gunn for Superman.
Me, it's like Quentin Tarantino, like the fact that James Gunn made Superman. Well, I've enjoyed a James Gunn movie before, Guardians of the Galaxy. It can't be that bad. Like, I will already just have that assumption, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that can be like personal brand. So you've got lots of layers of it. You've got your personal brand, which for most indies is probably not that important initially. That's something you build over time. I mean, Joseph and Hazelight built a bunch of great games to get to the point where they could really expand. But I do think it's important just to think about, like, and it goes back, your brand is ultimately a reflection of your products, right? So it starts with product. And your product, so your product needs to mean something. It needs to stand out. It needs to be remarkable. I love that word. Thank you, Seth Godin. One of my favorite words, because it's beautiful, and it means it doesn't. It's not about being the best. It's not about being the cheapest. It's not about being the shoutiest or the most expensive. It's just about standing out for something or some collection of things that make you remarkable. And I think your brand will be built on that product that you launch first. So I guess the challenge can be, depending on what you've decided to build, if it's a cutesy, chill platformer and your next game is going to be an 18 plus bloodthirsty FPS, like, how do you start and that becomes a challenge. And I think it's because brands need to be consistent. Look at Call of Duty. I mean, as much as there's the good ones and there's bad ones, both from a visual perspective and a playing perspective, you always know a Call of Duty game is going to be high action, and it's going to push you along, and you're going to be done with the career. And then if you're up for it, you can be killed by 12-year-olds all over the world in multiplayer.
Yeah. So it has like guidelines. It's interesting because I'm listening to you speak. I'm actually redoing so I've done events. I just called them Gaming Rally before. We came up with that name like very quickly because we had to name it something. And now I'm redoing it. And oh my God, I'm like basically paid for a logo designer, got somewhere, and I was like, we found something we really liked. And then I reverse image searched, and it was the exact same copy paste from another gaming company. I was like, no. So now I had to redo it. So now I'm on like a website called 99 Designs, and I'm trying to put the keywords of the name of the company in the logo. But then someone is saying, yeah, but that feels too corporate, that feels too childish. I'm like, well, okay, what do I want my brand to feel like? And then we come up with some words. Okay, I put that back to the designers, and now I'm in the final stages. I need to like select the logo and the colors, and it's just taking so much longer than I thought. Like this process started like a month and a half ago, and I'm like, I just need to name my event company something. But because I know this is going to last a while, and I can't just launch an event with a name and a logo and then say, we changed it in 6 months' time. Like, especially with an event, I feel like it needs to get it right. So I'm in that process now, and I'm just thinking, I don't want to make this about me, but like for a developer, for example, if we take it back to gaming, should they even be touching their logo before their game is made? Or should it, like, because you mentioned it comes from the product. Like, I understand what my events look like now, so I feel like I'm in a lot better place to pick a logo. But yeah, if I told myself to make a logo 10 events ago, I think I would probably have to redo it. So is it similar in a game situation? Like you just make the product first?
I think that's a really good question, and I think you've touched on the most obvious, the most commonly understood, and one of the big parts of a brand, which is the visual ID.
Yeah.
It's not, however, it probably isn't the most important, because the most important is that brand, those brand attributes. What is it that makes it? So, for example, if I go to one of your events, why is it one of Harry Focu's events? Well, probably because it's been, I'm gonna feed you lots of nice things, well organized. The drinks are on tap. That
the thing that actually people use me is energy and like the vibe, surprisingly, or like the right people in the room.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, how do I? Like I can tell you, probably a brand will be announced by the time this podcast comes out. Like, so my brand's called Hive Mind, and the idea is everyone enjoys the Hive Mind. And I actually managed to get the domain hivemind.world.
Nice.
So I'm like, okay, nice. So we've got the Hive Mind World Game Summit, where premium people from around the world, you can connect to the Hive Mind, you can all share ideas, also plug in. And I've got that going. I'm like, great. And then I realized, there's no games in here. How do I put a gaming feel to this? Should I force a gaming feel into this? And now I'm having those problems. Like, yes, I want it to feel a certain way. Then I feel like I have too many checkboxes. And what's happening in the logos is like, it's just way too busy. And I'm like, that's where I get overwhelmed. The brand is trying to do too much.
Yeah, I definitely, and just carrying on the visual side of things.
Yeah,
I definitely have a style. If you look at all my pack shots, of which there's been a few, probably more less recent, because the Hunter Call the Wild, the brand visual design redesign is
there something I can search to find it?
Is you can't see that because it's not out yet. So,
okay.
But for Need for Speed 2015, Payback, and Heat, which were kind of I was involved in, and all the Dirt games, I like clean. Because I think that always, ultimately, the visual design of your key art, let's call it that, is about getting noticed and being memorable. It's not about communicating a whole bunch of things, because you can't. And we have these hilarious things. There you go. So Payback, I'm not going to say I designed it. It was a very clever agency called Hagamami Carroll, and they were being briefed by the amazing, God knows what they're called these days. EA likes to rename departments, but the amazing creative departments at EA that we worked with at the time. And, we went for something that was relatively clean, clear, and pulls out what you wanted, which is ultimately an exciting, explosive racing experience with different vehicles. And if you're a car nerd, you can go and go, oh, that's a R34 Skyline. It's got the What's-It body kit on it. It's got Toyo alloys on it, or whatever, or tires on it. Sorry, and you can pick those things out, and you can go, oh, that's one of those, and got a BMW, blah blah blah. But they're secondary. The main thing is it's a car being chased by a helicopter on a dirty kind of sun-bleached pack, and that's kind of what you need to get. So it's simple. I'm a big believer in simplicity of brand and clarity. And if you, again, go to look at Nike, Call of Duty, McDonald's, all the biggest brands in the Coca-Cola in the world, how often do they screw with their brand? Rarely, if never. Pepsi had a famous relaunch. Can argue with that went well or not.
Before. Same with Burger King. They just went back to classic.
Yeah. And Jaguar Cars is a really interesting one, because they did this absolutely bonkers rebrand to say, we're not making petrol cars anymore. It's all going to be electric. We're ditching everything. Here's the new brand. Everyone hated it. Massive PR stir. Now they're going back and kind of reworking it a bit, but ultimately they made a massive impact on the industry, and everyone's going to remember that time when Jaguar did that wacky logo design and pushed out a pink car because they made impact, and an impact, as you know, is important. So yeah, brand visual ID, very important part of brand, but not the only part. You've got the really interesting components of the brand, the touchy-feely stuff, which are the kind of attributes of that brand, and then what benefits they bring, etc.
So, you mentioned something. The most important thing about brand isn't the visuals; it's like the attributes. So, if I'm looking to make a game now, like if we can role play, like, look, Ed, I do not have time to start thinking about this. Like, let me just make my game. I can come back to it later. Is that an issue? Like, where does this fit in the life cycle of kind of developing a game?
I mean, I think that's great, and I think it touches on where with the kind of the subject matter that we kind of discussed, which is the idea that flipping marketing, the idea of marketing from at the end to the beginning. Because if we're sat together and you're an amazing dev and I'm a marketing guy or a brand marketing guy, I'd be going, okay, you have to have the idea. Like, I can help say, here's some gaps, here's some interesting genre mashups that someone hasn't tried yet, here's some areas of the market, here's some platforms maybe you should focus on because Steam's a disaster, so maybe focus somewhere else. Let's not even talk about mobile. And so I can help with that. But you've got to, I want the creator, the person that's building the game, the dev, to have the idea, because it needs to come from something. And I'm a big believer of this mix of amazing creativity with great market intelligence is going to get you to a good place. And market intelligence is what I just discussed, but it's also players as well. Like, so if you say to me, I want to make a shooter, I mean, I'd probably say, please don't. There's too many. But let's say you did, and you've got this idea that's kind of something innovative, different. Great. Let's go find some players to talk to that are in that market. Go talk to them about what maybe the current games aren't delivering. How we can find some place. You've got to find that innovation space where you can deliver. And I think that's where marketing adds the value at the beginning, which is not just making a cool game because you've come up with a cool idea and everyone loves it around you and are all high-fiving and going, whoop, whoop, this is going to be great. Getting it to market and going, shit, nobody wanted it. It's great, but nobody wanted it. There's not enough people going to buy it. And that's fine if the outcome is art. But if the outcome is, I've got to pay someone and I've got to put food in the cupboards, then ultimately you need to have something that's commercially viable and successful and has a market.
Alrighty. So how does one check for that? Like, early days. And I've had a lot of different answers here. But I'm wondering, like, if you were making your own game, like, how do you how do you check if there's a commercial ability for my game? Because I've heard one answer, which is pay all this money to test from, like, playtesting essentially. And then the other one is just look what's already out there and then maybe see if there's a gap and then make that game. I feel like everything is just different. And then there's the other side, is like, just make a good game and, you the rest will come.
Yeah, exactly. I wish the last one was true. And let's be honest, it just isn't. There's so many examples of really, really great games that don't find an audience because of nobody wanted it, or it was sadly
Not
too
remarkable.
late. It wasn't remarkable in a particular way, or it just didn't have the support. I think going back to the question, I think it's just really important to figure out whether I think you can do some base. Sorry, I blanked on the question. It's come back. Don't worry. That was me wasting time while the brain was catching up. So there's lots of different ways to figure out whether there's a market. If you got money, then it's easier because you can, in EA's case, for example, there was a big team that you'd go, I need to know whether these, how successful has Forza Horizon 5 been, and tell me if there's a market. And some really amazing, clever people would send you a spreadsheet in 3 days. Not the case at any other company I've worked at, and certainly not the case for an indie startup. There are things in between where you can go. There are some services, VG Charts. There is a couple of other different kind of ones. You can pay like $30-40 a month or something, which I think is reasonable given that that's how much I pay Google just to, give me some interesting AI answers. And I think that's probably indie level. There's Newzoo, which is fantastic. I'm not plugging it, but it is a tool we use at Avalanche because we're kind of medium-size developer publisher. And that's where you can dig in and get a lot more data about sales and stuff like that. So that's good for understanding, is there a market? Because I think that is really truly important. Even big games companies, and this is before my time at Avalanche, but a cool idea, Second Extinction, which was a game that got released into early access, I want to say probably 2021, the year I started. Dinosaurs, a co-op shooter where you shoot dinosaurs together. It's a cool concept, but it just didn't find a market. And there were some other games around it that were just better, unfortunately. So yeah, it's got some. We've did some interesting work on rebuilding the key art for that. It's and it's cool.
And I've never heard of it.
No, I know. Unfortunately, and even a medium-sized company like Avalanche doesn't have the money to just throw tons of acquisition towards something. I mean, we went into Game Pass. And I wasn't working directly on it, but I went into Game Pass, got 1 million people in straight away, and unfortunately, it just didn't. It wasn't remarkable in the right ways, and therefore people just fell off. And there's so many tales of that, right? Of games coming out in early access on Steam or a demo, you play it in Steam Fest, and then nope, it's not got that. So that's why I would always argue for having conversations early on about even making some stuff up about what players do you think it's for? Because let's be honest, how many small indies are making games that they want, as opposed to making games for
the majority,
for players?
Right?
I would think so. No offense to any of them. I think
it's because of the logistics. Like, to make a game, you need to be the person putting code or drawing something. There's some games which are done by both now. Like there's the solo developers also doing the art, like Undertale or Balatro, for example. But they, by nature, made games they wanted to play. I think they've publicly said it. But because the marketer's not making the game in my head, therefore they probably don't have the marketer hat on. So by nature, indie games are now made, will not think of marketing first.
No, and I think, and even, medium-sized game developers are often in that case where they're still making things that they want. And even big developers, let's be honest, they're still doing things that they want. And if you are the Hauser crew at GTA, I don't think it matters. You can make games that you want because everyone else wants them too. And the same probably for Joseph Fares. But I would say that they're the exceptions. The majority needs to be, that's great, and I'm glad you want to play your own game because I think that's also very important. But how can we help people find that other information and think about it commercially at the early stages? You can ask yourself a bunch of simple questions of like, what is it? As in, give me a pitch. What's your elevator pitch? What makes it different to other games in the same category? Not just all other games, but in the same category. Who is it for? And why will they care? Like, that's probably, like, if you're just asking those questions, I've not worked with a load of indie developers. And I don't know what necessarily normally goes into a pitch, but that's what I'd be expecting to see if in a pitch is like really like getting to that remarkability, if that's even a word.
Yeah. I want to maybe take us back with your journey. If there's any marketers listening to this, if we shift from the developers now. So, because you worked as a producer at EA, right?
Yes, 2 years on Need for Speed Heat. I was a senior producer working together with 2 other senior producers, and I had a part of that game that I was responsible for. So
with production, because then you moved into more the marketing and brand side, like what carried over? Were you doing production on the marketing side, or was it like a jump? Like, can you tell me what happened?
Yeah. So I moved from Codemasters as a brand manager to EA as the brand director on Need for Speed. And then after 4 or so years, can't remember the exact time, there was an opportunity. There was a reshuffle. It's EA, that happens every week. So there was a reshuffle, and I had the opportunity to move into a production role. And frankly, I just thought to myself, this is an amazing opportunity. These don't come around. People wanted me to do it. And at EA, what's worth clarifying for everybody who's a producer elsewhere is EA's producers are not project managers like they are in most companies. They're product owners. So most companies call them product owners.
Do they not have the title product owner at EA?
Not when I was there. Not on PC console, maybe on mobile. But essentially, we were product owners. We went on product owner training, and it was about building scope for our areas and kind of prioritizing scope. I was specifically responsible for. I was responsible for the relationship with marketing because it kind of made sense because I was the marketer beforehand.
The background.
I was responsible for all the licensing relationships for all the car manufacturers, the building of the cars, the car handling, and other partnerships that we were doing. So I kind of took all of that whilst we had a senior producer doing all of the online and the network stuff, and then the senior producer making the main kind of game arc. And it was super good fun. I learned a ton. And after leaving EA in 2020 and then disappearing into the forest when everyone else was also not having a great time in 2020, I figured out that I love production, but I love marketing way more, and brand marketing especially. So that's why I went back into it when I joined Avalanche in 21.
So my follow-up here is, you said you learned a lot. I'm wondering, when you kind of entered Avalanche, is there anything you brought with you from EA that maybe wasn't there at Avalanche that, kind of was maybe an unexpected learning that carried over that maybe another marketer can hear? Like, what did you learn about marketing in production? Yeah, because the one thing I wanted to kind of maybe double click on, like you mentioned, the Need for Speed relationships with the car people. And we had a podcast on recently where the lady is mobile gaming, and she comes not from gaming, but she joined there, and she's trying to get relationship with restaurants. It's like a restaurant management game on mobile. And she was finding it harder than she expected to try to convince a brand to actually get involved in the games. Like, hey, why are we even paying you? You should be paying us the amount of impressions you're getting. But it was just like a lot harder than she expected. Maybe we can put that into two parts here. But yeah, what did you take away from your learnings from like EA and maybe brought into Avalanche?
Yeah, really good question. And I think a lot. I mean, EA are operators, I like to call them. Like, they are absolute operators. They ship games. They have fantastic resources, super clever, amazing people working there. And they also try new things. And so I was able to bring a bunch of knowledge from EA to Avalanche. But I think what really helped me, and what's some people struggle with when you go from big corporate to smaller company, is adapting that and tailoring it for the scale of company. It was very helpful for me that I'd worked for Codemasters before, and Cody's in Avalanche of similar size, about 500 people, so $100 million-ish a year revenue. So it was helpful for me with that experience. I think some people have come from big corporate and gone and tried to just apply things to a smaller company, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Why doesn't it work, actually?
I think because you've got all those other resources. So it's often the case where you didn't necessarily do all of that. Like the brand work we did on Need for Speed, I was very heavily involved, but there was a team that built built the research, did the research. Some amazing, clever people that good friends now who built all that research and pulled it in and gave us all the insights. And we then had to figure out how to use that insight as brand people. Whereas at Avalanche, we're doing a lot more of that.
You're doing a lot more. So I guess it's in layers, like startup, kind of SME, and then large company. Then you got like mega large company where there's teams internally dedicated to support you on this thing, where in a startup, you're like, what do you mean you're doing all of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I used to have a team that did that. Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. And I think what did I learn from my days in production? I think you had to be more organized. You had to manage your time better. You were working with, in EA, they call them development directors, DDs, which are the project managers. So I had a project manager on my back, like, have you done this? We need to do this. We need to do that, like all the time, which you don't tend to have as much in marketing. And I think I built systems to help me. So I built a new way of doing my emails, for example. I built productivity systems. I use a combination of Todoist for my tasks. I process emails as opposed to read them, and I used Evernote to take notes for everything. You're taking notes for everything. I was crap at taking notes when I was in marketing, but in production, you have to, because you've got a load of developers who you're responsible to, and they're responsible to you. So you can't just hope. Yeah, exactly. You can't internalize it. Plus, it's not good for you either, right? You don't sleep well if you're trying to internalize lots of crap.
Yeah. Well, I guess now you got AI notes now.
Indeed, right? Not perfect, but it definitely helps you in the moment, because I do not find it very easy to be very engaged in the meeting and take notes. I'm a really, I think, okay note taker, and I can be engaged with the meeting. Doing
Especially
both.
when you have to be engaged. I've noticed this myself. So if I'm doing an interview and it's not a podcast style, it's literally like Q&A, I'm fine taking notes. But at any point, like I have to actually make it a conversation, I can't. That's at least how I'm doing. I'd rather not.
There are some amazing people I've worked with that are able to do both, and credit them. I cannot. So having a person that can take notes, and then being, if you need to engage heavily and manage and drive a meeting, for example. But I learned a lot of productivity stuff in production because you just have to. And I think that was really useful. I also learned what it's like being the other side going, come on, marketing, we need you to decide whether that is okay for the pre-order, pre-order bonus or not. And we need to know by X because we kind of got to build it. And just understanding development streams and how builds get distributed and all that kind of stuff is so has really been very useful throughout, and it will continue to be throughout my marketing career.
Very, very interesting. The thing about marketing deadlines, maybe this isn't interesting to marketing, but maybe you can educate me. But like, I'm sure, like you see all these games getting delayed, right? And I'm wondering how much of that is development, marketing, or both. But I'm guessing games get delayed purely from a marketing perspective, surely, right? Like,
I've not seen that happen. Actually,
not seen
I'm
it.
sure
Okay.
it does.
Okay.
I'm sure it does, just by the law of averages. But ultimately, the game usually gets delayed because of external forces, i.e., Grand Theft Auto 6.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's been a tough year for developers, hasn't it? And or it's not ready yet. And the most usual reason is it's not ready yet. And I sometimes it can be marketing involved in that decision, and I think that's great. But I'd much rather that there was a developer saying, hands up, like, we need another 6 months. This isn't going to be the best experience for our players. And I think that is usually the case. That it's usually developers taking ownership. So I think, there's certainly from a player perspective, consumer perspective, there's this idea that marketing are going, you can't do that, because I've never found, like, generally speaking, the P&L responsibility sits with development, or it sits with a product owner, which is often in development anyway. So that is usually the person making the decision.
So the marketing, maybe this is good just to, like in my head, isn't the marketing person also thinking P&L and like ROI and stuff? Like that's all they're thinking about. But you're saying like the true ownership is with the developers, and they should be.
It's often, I've worked at 3 separate game developer publishers, so worked with some indies as well. But at Codemasters, it was shared, and at EA, it was shared. So you had a brand manager and you had an EP, basically, or a brand director or whatever. But you had those two people, and they shared responsibility for the P&L. It was like that at EA, but the tiebreaker, if you like, if you need to make a decision and you can't agree, it was always the EP that made that decision. At Avalanche, the system is slightly different. It's quite, which we've gotten used to over the last year and a half because it was relatively new. But basically, there's a product director who sits in a separate org, and then there's a brand person and the producer person, right? So you've got these three legs to the stool, and they, in theory, should come to consensus. Good Swedish thing. We like that. But if you can't, the product director is the tiebreaker, and the product director has full P&L responsibility. And I think it's a really interesting one. I don't think anything is perfect. I do think that where we've perhaps struggled at Avalanche, and we are rectifying that with hiring more senior people in certain areas, is having someone in the brand marketing side that is responsible, that can bring that expertise and experience to challenge some of the other to the two other folks in that group.
Especially, maybe this is a question that will benefit some marketers. Like, how can you, as a marketer, put your case forward and actually be listened to? Because if the actual onus or the decision is coming from the developer or the product owner, then you might have an idea, but then it doesn't actually get listened to. I'm sure that happens. Like that. How do you even build a case for the developer as a marketer?
I mean, ultimately, I remember vividly, fantastic art director at Codemasters once telling me, we make 90 Metacritic games. You need to make 90 Metacritic marketing. And it scared the living shit out of me. I was quite a young man at the time, and I was like, all right then. But there's high expectations. That they're putting a lot of effort and time and energy into everything, and their heart and soul often. And there's an expectation that marketing would do the same. So I would say turn up with not always evidence, because marketing is both an art and a science. And not everything is scientific, although there's a lot more you can prove with data now than there ever was. So I would say come with a proper business case, right? Why is it that you want to do ABCD? Is it you want to have a demo in the Steam Next Fest because we know that's going to be such an amazing point where we'll bring a load of players into our community and it's so important, but oh my God, there's a lot of effort to go into that. From a development point of view, it might mean that we lose a feature, for example. So you have to have that conversation about what's more important, and you need to do that as a group, but marketing needs to come with what's the benefit? Like, what are we expecting? And you can do that generally through benchmarks, and you can use SteamDB or some other kind of free tools where you can go and say, hey, this game did that, and they got a bunch of positivity from it.
Cool. So it's always evidence-based, but like the art is still there from...
Definitely. I wouldn't want to do the job I do if there wasn't still some art, and I think developers are probably the same, right? If it's all just, 50% of players say they want black thingies in the game.
I think that's what's happening a lot on the mobile side. Like, you've seen some games where it's so interesting. We were talking about Kingshot. So it's this mobile game. It's like every other ad is Kingshot. And on the podcast, this was with Matish, he was saying, essentially all the ads are about one part of the game, which is literally just basically clickbaiting, because that part of the game is 5%, because that tower defense version of the game, the spend depth, how much someone could spend in that version of a game, is not as high as just a normal, Clash of Clans building your base type thing. So the 99% is the Clash of Clans thing, but the first few days experience is this weird tower defense thing. And that for me is like let's follow the numbers. Like, okay, this will make most money, but for marketing, let's do this instead. And it's just such a weird thing where even though people are going to drop off, the people that stay will be high spenders. And I can't imagine that happening in like PC, where it's like you catfish people, they come in and hopefully they spend more.
No, I remember some good presentations from the Wargaming crew at a summit I was at last year, and I was like, wow, okay, fine. I mean, that's obviously accepted in the mobile space. I am less familiar with it, so I'm much more familiar with PC console. And I think it's important for a red thread to run through. On Need for Speed 2015. So Need for Speed 2015 is what people kind of outside of the company EA used. We call it Need for Speed 2016. Don't ask why. But the one that hasn't got a subtitle on it, I remember that us being really clear. Like, if we're trying to embody the brand of Need for Speed Underground 2, which is kind of what everybody thought we should do, and we're trying to build this the underground world that you never knew existed, we have to have the red thread all the way through marketing. And I work with this amazing group of people who were managing kind of the communications, PR, community, and campaign stuff. So Colin McRae in the States and Gareth Arculus, they were unbelievably brilliant people. And they helped us, who were the product marketing team at the time, kind of build the campaign to ensure that it felt like it was very connected. So that the experience you got when you got into the game was the thing we sold you, because no one wants to do anything else different. I know sometimes, that's what you have to do on a mobile platform with gazillions of games and apps that you have to compete with, and tiny attention spans. But certainly I believe that marketing, both in its visuals but also in what it's selling, should very clearly represent the product.
Yeah, because also it's a word of mouth game, right, with console, where maybe mobile is probably 100% a lot less of an impact, word of mouth, versus kind of on a PC console. So you got to also deliver on the promise for someone to be able to recommend you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and that can bring you down as well, obviously, if you don't deliver on the promise. And that's happened in my experience, where we've been a bit optimistic with the promise.
How do you avoid that? How do you avoid overhyping a game? Because one could argue, why don't we want to overhype the game? Like, we get more sales.
Yeah. How many 65 to 70 Metacritic games have sold millions of units because people have just thrown money at it?
Yeah, so is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, I'm thinking No Man's Sky, I saw the hype and the marketing was elite. The game was okay. Then they fixed it and everything's all right. Is that okay? Yeah. Cyberpunk as well is another example. Like, the marketing was so good Yeah, the Keanu Reeves, everyone was like, let's go. And then it was like,
Yeah.
oh no, the game's not good. But then they fixed it.
Yeah, and that's like, I think if there's probably a fine line where you get to a point you're just bullshitting and nobody wants to do that. No developer wants that. No marketer wants that. No player wants that. But yeah, you've got to build hype. And if you think about, Cyberpunk's a great example, right? They overhyped that so big, so big. And I was unemployed at the time, so I played it because I thought I had the time to do it and the time to restart the Xbox every time it crashed. But yeah, I mean, and I think it requires it requires a level of perseverance and loyalty to that brand, whether it was CD Projekt Red or Cyberpunk itself, to stay with it. And these in even 5 years, God, is it 5 years since that game came out? Nearly, right? Even 5 years later, I would say that loyalty is a rare thing when it comes to brand. Even just looking at the recent Battlefield 6 stuff, which super kudos to the EA folks and the people I still know there. I mean, they did an amazing job. But like, how much loyalty is there still, or does it just need to be a really, really fucking awesome shooter that's going to generate a lot of buzz and hype and bring people back in?
Yeah, time will tell. I want to maybe take you back to people that you think were really, really good marketers who stood out to you, like maybe in your career, versus someone who was like an okay marketer, but not as remarkable. Like, what do you think is the difference?
Really good question. I shan't name names. That sounds like a terrible idea.
No.
So I will try and think of people without naming names. I mean, I think ultimately be open-minded and be ready to be challenged, because marketing is a science and an art. And sometimes the best ideas and the coolest things, when you actually look at the numbers, don't make any sense. And I think people can get like, no, it's great, we really want to do this event, and we'll go to Gamescom as a medium-sized publisher, it's going to cost us 2 million euros, it'll be fine, we can't prove any of it's going to make any money, but it'll be fine, like, because it's cool.
I've noticed,
and I think
this came up, sorry to interrupt, in one of my interviews for one of my like ghostwriting clients. He mentioned like data. I think it was a proverb basically. It was like, you have a lie, an utter lie, and then you have data. So like, you can make something really, really look like a good idea if you want to, if you just finesse the data. And there's so many other ways you can probably find data right now. And I think it can be quite overwhelming because then, okay, do I have to spend an hour now fact checking your data? Like, it's like, let's look at the full data. Like, it's tricky.
Especially if you're using AI, right? Because as much as clever and as amazing it is, it makes shit up to make you feel better. Yeah. And even when you tell it not to, and that's a problem. And which ironically is quite a human thing to do, right? So yeah, I think it's tough, but I think great marketers are both really open to new things, but also like have the academia, have the experience, and frankly, I mean, what I want with it, whoever it is a really amazing collaborator who's it's not about them. It's not about them getting, going to Cannes to a marketing thing to look good. It's about doing great work and just enjoying it and being fulfilled by that and working with great people. And honestly, like, all the people, and I've hired a lot of people at Avalanche, and it's as we were talking about before we started, it's a really tough job hiring people because it's a bloody big responsibility asking someone to leave their job to come to this place that you're selling, and work for you, and that's only the beginning of then supporting the person and growing them and all that kind of stuff. So I think what I look for is I always hire on kind of core values and over pure experience anyway, because I want to understand that they're going to work well with others, and it's a team sport at the end of the day. And I've seen people who are rock stars, and great for them, but I don't find that that's the way to surefire success. I think I'd rather have a really good team than I would have okay team with a couple of rock stars. Yeah, like I think you always have different talent, but
how can you tell?
It's really tough
because I'm in that stage now. I'm about to do interviews properly, let's say for the first time, and it's so weird because I was a recruiter and I've sat on interviews, sat on Avalanche interviews. Like I've sat on a lot, probably over 100 gaming interviews. Every studio does them differently. My most favorite was one for a studio based in Germany, a mobile gaming studio. I found his process like super cool, like half an hour, elite, all about the person, and then a more technical interview, but he wasn't asking too much of their time. But I just felt like you got so much out of that short amount of time. I'm just wondering, in your experience, like the hires that went really, really well, maybe the hires that could have been better, like is there anything that you learned that you weren't going to do again? Any advice for someone looking to hire?
Good question. I certainly don't. I certainly never want to do interviews with just me. Partly because what I said before about not being able to really engage and take notes at the same time, and partly because I don't believe that I should have the single opinion on whether this person.
When you say that, do you mean avoiding a one-on-one interview, or just avoiding that being the only decision, or you mean any one-on-one interview?
Both, yeah, but definitely, I try not to do one-on-one interviews if at all. If someone wants to do that and they feel comfortable that they can, they can then take out all they learned and write up some really great notes, that's fine. I feel like the power I have in really truly understanding if the candidate was someone that I want to progress with personally is when I then go and speak to the other person in the interview and we have that conversation of what did you think? What did we think? And then we compare notes. At that point is where suddenly things go off in my head. I'm like, aha, yes.
Well, I've not even considered a panel interview because of, maybe this is a bad assumption. Like I'm a small company. Why should I bother Frank to go into the interview? Would you say that's something that starts at a certain size, or do you think that's just a principle you would try to do from the start?
I mean, I'd always try and do it if possible, but obviously it's physically impossible if you're the only person in the company. So scale is definitely.
I'm just wondering. Okay, maybe a tactical question, Ed. So, like, who would be the second person? Do they have to be your manager? Could they just be a prospective peer to the person?
I've had consultants be the other person, trusted, NDA'd, experienced people I've worked with for a long time.
I'm very surprised. This is so cool. I didn't thought about this. Like, wow. So you could bring someone in just for the sake of the interview?
Yeah, and as long as you trust their opinion, that's the key thing, right? You have to be. It has to be someone you really trust that they're going to give you honest and valuable, useful intelligence on that interview that they've just had. Because what I love about that is it's their experience of the same thing. It's not their experience of doing a separate interview one-to-one where the other guy or girl was having a bad day, or you know what I mean?
And also not experience. What you rehash to them as well.
Yeah. So I
seriously reconsidering my hiring now. Very cool. Nice. We haven't touched much on community. Based on the work that you've done, like how would you approach community as kind of a marketer, like from first principles?
Worth saying, I'm not a community person. I've had the pleasure of working with wonderful and hugely experienced community people, but I'm not a community person myself. But I think what I've learned is it's never too early to begin your community. And it's really important to now more than ever, to build that early and use is probably a slightly negative word, but engage with that community to help you build the right game for the right players. Because if that's my passion, that's it. It's about helping great developers build the right game, the best game for the right people. And one of the ways you can do that is engaging with the community early, because you can build a Discord, you can do it on the Steam forums or Reddit or wherever, but you can start to engage with people and have them respond back to you. And if we think about brand, what is it? It's the reflection of your players.
Yeah. And that's a very good post check, I'm guessing, on your brand in real time. Because how hard, you wouldn't have to go and pay or do client interviews. You're like, the Discord just lives and breathes. And I'm sure there's we had someone on the podcast, he runs a company which is called Leveler, and it's a Discord tool where he takes all the interactions of your Discord and then makes insights from it, and they can see market sentiment and stuff, specifically for games. So there's tools like that now. So imagine that you have a real time look at your brand.
Absolutely, yeah, and exactly. That sounds really awesome. Actually, I shall take a note.
Yeah.
And then there's some other tools where you can do targeted playtests and things like that. I saw an amazing tool. Unfortunately, I can't remember of it to give them a plug, but I thought it was really good at GDC this year, where basically, and I love, by the way, a tool that just does one thing really fucking well. Like, there needs to be more of that. No, I do not want a tool that's going to butter my
Yeah.
bread and make eggs for
Replace
breakfast.
your current system with this. It's like, no.
It was basically just a playtest tool, and it was so slick and so amazing and not over expensive. Bear in mind, I'm looking at it from an Avalanche perspective, so I still think it was hundreds of dollars a month. But bear in mind, some big tools that you might use might be thousands, or hiring a community person is, a couple of $1,000 minimum a month, right? So I think, finding the tools to pull that information and be clever about it. There must be AI stuff these days that can pull it. And then, so that's one way, but that's one thing. You want the feedback early, but you also want to build trust, and you want to that's building a brand with a community together. Unless you are a massive existing brand, but even sometimes if you are that, and I think Battlefield Labs, for example, was Battlefield and EA's way of going, we know we kind of screwed up with the last game. It wasn't as great as we meant it to be. Let's have you come in and help us make the right game. And now, when they did that big launch last week, or 31st of July, they did, they obviously had a whole bunch of people already on side to help them build the buzz. And in addition, they also gave all those people early beta access, which is very clever. So, yeah, super interesting. But I think, so for me, never too early to start your community. When I was speaking to these indie folks this morning, I said the two most important streams of work, let's call it, because it doesn't have to be a person, but streams of work that aren't build a great game or, make sure the money adds up, is a kind of product brand marketer type role, where someone comes in and is thinking about the players and the market and the positioning and the USPs and all that kind of stuff. And the other one is community. Having someone who can, or a time of somebody that can focus on building that, because the people I spoke to this morning were like, we set up a Discord, we put a trailer in there, and then it kind of went dead. And it's like, because you've got to manage a community, you've got to engage with the community consistently.
I mean, Battlefield, I'm just blown away because the thing you just told me about Battlefield Labs, I heard it was good, but I just did not dig into it. But I'm just on the Battlefield Labs website. I want to maybe do a parallel here, because I think this is something that a lot of people can do. Because let's see if you can catch my thinking here. So, from my understanding, Battlefield Labs, they invited people who were like super players, I guess, or even some streamers, I'm guessing, people with influence. Cool.
Yeah.
And then they gave them a way to actually interact and affect the development of the game for them. And then they used them in the marketing materials. So, wow, okay. So Balatro did very similar thing, and this is just an indie example for me. Well, the way he got the game played is he gave exclusive access to some streamers, which he loved watching, and he just emailed them. I think he didn't send that many emails, like 30 to 50 emails. And then the game was so cool, but no one else could play it. So then there was naturally a bit of hype. People joined the Discord, and then as he built the game with the streamers in mind, like there was one streamer I watched called Dr. Disrespect, and he was one of like the 50 people, Dr. Respect, not Disrespect, the other one. But he gave like a bunch of feedback and affected some of the games, and then it got released. This feels like, just to maybe for someone listening, like just because Battlefield did it doesn't mean small companies can't do it too. Because if anyone wants to dig into what Balatro did, like one man did that. The same kind of setup where you get people with influence or people who love that genre of game and get them involved. Because imagine the marketing story there. It's like, we built what players want. Okay, of course you did. Like, no, look, we actually got them involved.
We actually did. And then, of course, if you do it, which it does mean that you have to actually do it. That you have to listen. You have to make the changes. But if you do, then those people are just going to be your advocates. And what do you need more than anything else in video games these days is advocates, especially if they've got a YouTube channel and lots of followers.
Hell yeah.
Avalanche is actually doing something, so a much smaller company than EA doing something called Frontrunners. And that's the idea is build prototypes of new games, fail fast. But what they do very specifically is test them very, very early. And they test them with real players from the market they think they're aiming towards. They do a bit of work there to figure out what the player target is. And then they test them. And the idea is that in having them play tested super early, you're getting real, there you go, well done. You're getting real players playing it, and they're giving you real feedback. They also, by the way, build in very robust telemetry. Because what you
Wow.
need
So you
is
have, I'm just clocked what you're saying. So there's an Avalanche wide Frontrunners community, which is their playtest community, and then they are the ones who get to. So they've basically done this from a studio level, not on a game level.
yes, yeah, exactly. They're called the R&D team, and they have multiple different projects on on any one time. You go into the Discord, you get given special access. You then, if you sign up, you get a Steam key. You go play it. And what's really important, just to hammer it really hard, is you need a way to capture the information from players really well. And we have a fantastic user research leader who's working on the team who's doing that,
Nice.
and knows how to do surveys that get the right response. You
Sweet.
also need telemetry, because you need to know both what they tell you but also
what it
how
means.
they play, because they don't always align perfectly, and you need both to really figure out and understand. And the idea is kind of build it like an onion. What's the core gameplay? What's the core loop? What's the meta? And starting to build from there, before even you've got fancy visuals or a positioning or any of that. It's really early, trying to figure out if there's a market for your game, which I absolutely love, and I wish them all the best with that, because I think it's brilliant.
Really cool. I don't want to harp on it. How do you know when that was started?
I do, yes, because a good friend of mine, Thomas Wallström, is the product director on that, and he was. When we had two heads of marketing, one for Systemic Reaction, one for Expansive Worlds, he was Systemic Reaction, I was Expansive Worlds, so we're good buddies. And when we did the rejig, he moved over to that in March 2024, I think. So it's been going over a year.
Wow.
And I don't want to speak beyond my NDA, but a bunch of stuff has happened, and they've done a bunch of concepts, and there's some really exciting stuff going through that. So
I want to just highlight that Discord community. I just checked, 2,600 people. So a lot of people might have thought, which I did, this will be a massive undertaking, tens of thousands of people, but even an Avalanche, which is 500 plus studio, you get 2,600 playtests. I'm guessing you're already finding value from what may seem to some like a small number.
And they built that from nothing. So the first playtest, I can't remember, it's like 200 or even less. Then it kind of got into the 500s. And then for the last thing, it was in more like the 2,500. So and you just have to work at it, and you have to give them something to do, play, engage with, so they have people that actually work on that Discord and keep people engaged. But no, you don't. I mean, the statistically significant, which is an important word in market research, is I can't remember the actual number. It's something like 175 or something responses.
Amazing.
It's not big.
This is not unreachable.
No, absolutely not.
Lovely. What I want to leave people with, Ed, what I usually do is kind of for maybe young people or people looking for their next kind of gig, next career, any tip that you found really useful that you'd want to maybe share to others in a similar situation?
No one ever gives me tips. No. What would I say to a young person? I mean, I would say, because I've got two kids, both of which are teenagers and both play video games they're playing at the moment.
Are they going to join the games industry, or are you going to tell
them? Who knows, right? For a long time, it was, what the hell do you do, Dad? And now they understand. They're like, interesting, that's cool.
Would you want them to join, or would you?
I think the challenge with the games industry, as you know very well, is over 2020, 2021, we spiked at whatever it was, 400,000 people in the games industry globally. And then it's back down more like 250. And so it's going to maybe.
Oh, I did not know those numbers.
I might be slightly off, but they're a year old. But it was crazy.
That is ridiculous. Yeah,
it's insane. We just did a massive reset, but we're still higher than I think maybe we're at 300, and we were at 175 before COVID.
Yeah, now
so
it's 330 according to a Gemini AI overview.
Well done. So I'm not far off. That's good. Good for a guess.
Yeah.
That was. But so we've had this reset, and we're also under huge amounts of pressure from AI in terms of what can AI do that can save people a bit of cash. Let's be honest, that's what it is. We don't as much as it's we want to avoid the question, what can we do that's gonna save that.
So I think headcount, just flat out, right?
Saves money. At the end of the day, I can get and the nicest way to say it is we can help our employees get more out of the same amount of work that they're doing. Great. There's a negative side which we won't go into, but my point is the games industry is under a lot of pressure. I think it's at a turning point, is probably too grandiose. It's just we're developing. We're a very fast-moving industry that develops very fast, and there's a lot of changing things. And I just, it's tough to say you should go into the games industry, because I met an indie developer here in Gothenburg, wonderful guy running a small team. And he's like, I know like 3 or 4 grads that graduated from a great games university, Skövde in Sweden, and year later still don't have a job. And it's like, in fact, more than a year, I think. And a friend of mine at Avalanche was the same. He's like, and there's a bunch of people who've never had a job since they graduated some years ago. And it's like, ouch. So I would say be really certain and have a plan B. Is probably that I would always say, like, I say to my daughter who actually wants to be a novelist because she's very creative, have a plan B, because that might not work.
Ed,
and she very cleverly said,
a lot of writers don't understand. There's novel writing, but there's so much other writing. By the way, just maybe you can let her know. You don't know how hard it is to hire a writer. You see all these starving writers, but then there's like, how many writers actually want to write to a certain expectation and then like okay with feedback? It's actually less than 10%. I've spoke to a few other ghostwriting agencies paying very good money, fully remote work. Like, maybe I'm just on this side and it feels so weird, but like, it is actually very hard to find a good writer. And that is very funny, because I grew up thinking, haha, writing, don't be silly, get a real job. When now I'm on this side, I'm like, oh my God, where are all the writers?
Yeah. Copywriting is a really amazing skill. And like you say, with lots of creative work, if you're a novelist, you perhaps don't want to take the feedback. Whereas if you're a copywriter, then you need to work in a collaborative
then you
way.
can't. Yeah, because also it's not only our internal feedback, maybe tangent again, but like, then you have the client feedback. It's like, look, it's okay. I think we have to separate like the art and then I guess the delivery,
the skill, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
especially when because we're measuring outcomes as well. We're not selling books. We're measuring like, did this get likes? Did this influence and result in a booked meeting? This is why typically in the past this hasn't happened. So it's a bit more A/B testing in, I guess, my world.
I think, and I'll try and tangent this back. That's a really good point. Like, we are, because of the industry under a lot of pressure, there are sadly game studios that were around 6 months ago and are not around anymore, right? Even big ones, and it's really sad. And it's sad every time you read that green thing go up on someone's LinkedIn profile, and like, oh no. But I think, apart from having a plan B, but you also, everything is becoming more rigorous. There's going to a higher expectation of being able to back up what you say with data, and I think we just have to be. That's expected. So be open-minded, take feedback, develop, and bring, as a marketer, bring some element of kind of rigorous backup data, whatever you want to call it, knowledge, experience, because it's expected, and we're going to have to, we've got to work hard, basically.
Yeah, and I think also it's I was going to say the word pride, but I think it's the wrong word. Like, maybe leave the ego at the door. And an easy way to do that, I keep recommending people, is to look for mentors. And there's actually so many. Like, you might not be able to get an interview, but you can get a mentor conversation relatively quickly. Amir Satvat has a list of 2,500 active mentors who will give you 15 to 30 minutes. If you go to his website, you just message 100 people. Even if 99 never reply, you get one person to hop on a call who's in your kind of genre, let's say writing or marketing, and you say, hey, what do I need to do to become the best writer in the world? And then boom, you've now got a coach, which I've been spending loads of money on. But in the games industry, it's such a collaborative industry. Like, you can get that feedback loop even if you haven't worked yet. And I think a lot of people, it's not their fault, they just don't know that sort of thing is out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not getting ready to sign up just yet, but I definitely see me now, having been in the industry 25 years, like, it's time to pay back a little bit, which is why, I had lunch with a guy. Yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm trying, I had lunch with a guy in Gothenburg a few weeks ago who's building a game, who's having to work a day job to be able to afford it, and met some people this morning, because I think if I can just give a bit of advice and share some of my knowledge that helps them, then that's great.
Beautiful. I think we'll end it there. Ed, thank you so much for your time. How can people get in touch? How can people work with you?
Look me up on LinkedIn. My full name is Edward, as my mother gave it to me, but I generally go by Ed. My LinkedIn profile is Edward, but Newby-Robson is a stupid, long, haven't got time for the story, surname, and there ain't many of us. So I'm easy to find
links
on LinkedIn.
In the description.
Exactly, as they say.
Yeah, sweet. Edward, thank you so much. And for everyone at home, if you've listened all the way, share it in your Slack group, send it to your boss, subscribe, crazy idea. Thank you for listening. Alrighty. And goodbye, everyone.